Welcome to the Mies Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, the culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, I'll be interviewing world-class entrepreneurs in the food space that are shifting the paradigm of how we innovate and operate in our industry. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Yo, they say art mirrors life with every stroke of the pencil. I'm giving you folks a glimpse into.
My guest today has been in food journalism for the past 20 plus years, creating the position of food editor for herself at Travel and Leisure before moving on to Epicurious and then becoming the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine magazine. Nilou Motamed is an Emmy-nominated writer, TV personality, former director of inspiration with Conrad Hotels, and co-founder of the brand and strategy consultancy firm Story Collective. She is currently a permanent judge on Netflix revival of Iron Chef, and this is one of those conversations that could have gone on for hours, so much so that I decided to break it into 2 episodes. In this first episode with Nilou, we talk about her childhood, fleeing Tehran during the Iranian Revolution and emigrating to Paris, and then the U.S. We talk a lot about Persian cuisine and culture, everything from tadik to kebabs to, well, the casual art of enjoying great Iranian caviar. There's definitely a lot of chatter about great breakfast. Nilou really loves breakfast, so we talk about kanji and pho and shakshuka, and then she tells us about this Persian dish of shredded meat and oat called Haleem. And then we shift into how she actually became the editor-in-chief of Food and Wine and the importance of surrounding yourself with really great people and always over-delivering. Nilou is definitely an inspiration in so many ways, and I'm really grateful that we had a chance to chat. So as always, I hope that you enjoy the show as much as I did.
Tired of promises from liars. My mama says I'm talented. Imagine I require my heart's only desire. Create art you acquire.
Hi.
Hello there.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? How are the suburbs?
They are good. I hate to call them that because
I mean, I grew up there, so I feel like.
No, I know. We're like in the woods, and whenever I think of like the rows of houses, I'm like,
okay. Yeah, I'm not thinking like you're in like the like little ticky-tacky houses. I mean, listen, I live in the suburbs of Brooklyn, so I feel like it's all the same.
Well, I know where you live, where I lived for about 15, 20 years. I was in Park Slope for about 20 years before I came here.
Wow. So yeah, Carroll Gardens and Park Slope are basically twins, except for where I think are a little bit more Italian.
Yes, you're definitely more Italian. I've always had an affinity for Carroll Gardens, even though I spent most of my time in Park Slope. And there's way more restaurants in Carroll Gardens than...
Although now I think our neighborhood has gotten kind of completely overtaken by like Fort Greene and Williamsburg in terms of good restaurants. It is true we have decent restaurants, but now like the great restaurants are not in this neighborhood. It's okay. I mean, I can travel. Although Williamsburg is really far too far. Just far.
It is. I don't even consider it Brooklyn. It's like its own thing, you know?
Our friend Missy Robin just opened this place called MP, which is just so good. And I'm like, listen, you might as well have opened in a different city. I mean, it is true, Brooklyn is very big, but I mean, I want to go there all the time. And it's far. Again,
yeah,
I'm not complaining. It's quick from the city.
It is quick from the city, but from Brooklyn, you kind of have to take an Uber no matter what. I mean, which you kind of do anyways, but there's no real, the trains, going that Greenpoint train that's madness.
You know what I'm saying? So, exactly. Whereas like, it's quick. It's made for people who like commute from the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the fact that I call the city is also fun.
I know. So I moved to New York in 2000. And Williamsburg had one restaurant from Zach Palacio called Chicken Bone, I think.
It's funny. I remember Zach's restaurant in Tribeca. Not Tribeca, in
5-9,
in
right?
Meatpacking.
In Meatpacking District. Yeah, 5-9.
Yeah, which I love.
Right.
There was I still am obsessed with that preparation they did with the pickled watermelon rind. That was like I think it was like pig's ears, or now I'm misremembering the dish, but it was really, really good. Really, really good.
Fatty crab was awesome. The oyster omelet.
That was really good. But then he went on the Upper West Side and then he left.
Yeah. Well, he had the place in Hudson that was also really good.
He still does, no?
Well, he's got Back Bar and Fish and Game. I believe Fish and Game closed.
Did it during the pandemic?
Yeah, Back Bar is still there.
We got married up in the Berkshires, and I feel like so much stuff has opened up, in Hudson Valley that was not at all, remotely. We got married in 2003. We're about to celebrate 20 years married. Is that crazy?
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. That is incredible. We got married in the Catskills in, oh my God, Bovina Center, New
Oh,
York. Just like
Bovina,
in the
yeah.
middle. Yeah,
A friend of ours lives in Bovina. It's supposed to be like a really, really cute community.
it really is. Yeah, there's a really cool restaurant there that I'm spacing the name of.
It's okay. We don't need to know any specifics. This is going to be a conversation about generalities and being like, so I've decided actually with my husband and all of our friends who we have so much like work stuff in common. I was like, we have to start writing shit down because we can't become those old people who are like, remember the place that we used to go to that we loved? And it's like perpetually like all of us are like, yeah, he was on the corner. And I'm like, yeah. And had like the blue awning. And then we don't remember the names of anything because
Yeah.
we've been here long enough.
You know, it's funny you say that because I read a lot of books, and now
That's
I
awesome.
find I forget things that I read. And I actually reached out to this incredible woman who has this company that actually teaches people how to take the LSAT.
Oh,
I reached out to her because she's in the CEO group that I'm a part of. And I wanted to learn not how to take notes better, but how do you retain information better?
tell me what she said. I want to know that very much.
So it's called translation. And essentially what you do is you read a short paragraph or just a short, like little piece of information, and then you quickly translate it back in your own words.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say a quip about it. So I'm not even going to try to do an example right now, but you reiterate it in your own words so that you're not sort of copy pasting something down. And
Right.
then you say some sort of simile or something analogous to it so that it's very clear that you understood like the premise. And you also use, and by the way, there's probably a lot more to this. We had like a 30-minute conversation. Intonation is really important. So, obviously emotions are a big driver of how we retain information because our body and our emotions are at peak. They think this is more important. We should pay more attention. So the intonation as you say this thing back to yourself is important. So I use it now for ideas or restaurants or some drink that I had. And we were at this thing called Little Stony Point this weekend with my kids and wife. And there's all these trees that fell on the water. And you've probably seen trees when they fall down. The bottom is like this huge root system. And it's freaking gorgeous. It's like this piece of artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want that in my house. I want that to be a piece of artwork. And so I knew I'd forget it. I didn't have my phone on me. And so I did this practice of translating, like tree systems are beautiful and the way that they did it. And then I wrote a quip about anyways.
So with TV, when I used to do a lot of morning TV, I can't memorize. I can't memorize at all. Like there's zero, that's just not a skill set that I have. Like I can retain, but like I can never like keep things in the exact same, like it's kind of vague. And so like broad strokes, really good, colorful description, but not like there's like 30 rooms. Like that never stays with me. But then obviously for TV, it has to, because when you're describing, so back in the day, I used to be a travel editor. And so I used to go on and talk about destinations and hotels and restaurants and blah, blah, blah. And so what I would do is like, it would not be enough for me to just type it or even write down the notes. I had to say it out loud. And once I heard myself say it, then I could repeat it. So I think that what she said is actually true. I just don't know how, when you're reading a book, how realistic it is for you to say things out loud.
It takes a lot more time.
Yeah.
Your way of learning is, it's analogous to Einstein, where he said, never remember anything that you can look up later. It's not worth it. He wouldn't remember his own birthday,
You're effed, your phone isn't attached to your hand.
Anyways.
We have a lot of ground to cover regardless. And one of these days we're actually going to hang out and look at root systems and stuff.
Well, it's funny. I think part of what I'm going to do today, because I was so excited learning more about your background.
Oh yeah, you got a chance to do a deep dive after we talked, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And we chatted for a bit, and then I learned a little bit more. And I think the word opulence comes to mind a lot when I think about. When I think about dinner parties that you throw in, I'm like, man, that sounds like an awesome dinner party.
Opulence. I always say maximalism, but I feel like opulence is extra. It's like more.
Yeah, when I hear you talking about oysters and caviar and how your grandmother was even more, we're going to do a little fun thing with that, I think, later. But
all right. I'm here. I'm available for all the talking.
You travel a lot. You were just recently traveling, right?
Yeah, so we just got back from 3 weeks away. We went to Turkey, and I hadn't been back to Turkey since 2008. My husband and I used to work at a travel magazine called Travel and Leisure. And back in the day when we were there, he was a star. I imagine him as Tintin. He was like the star reporter of the magazine. So sorry to all the other people who were very talented who worked in the magazine, in my eye, especially since we're married. And I was this kind of up and coming editor. And so what he would get these incredible assignments. And one of them was to go to Turkey to cover this hotel called Metakiza, which is this beautiful, imagine like every sort of sexy, dreamy waterside hotel you've ever seen, but next level. So perfect lighting, perfect music, perfect. The grounds are just like lush. There's cicadas. It's just a magical, magical place. The food is exceptional. The chef Aret has been, crushing it since we were there in 2008. And now, all these years later, we went back for the first time. The reason we've been originally was because Peter was writing a story for Travel and Leisure about the birth of this kind of hit scene in Bodrum and on the coast in Turkey.
Yep.
And then we went back, and turns out it's not burgeoning. Now it is arrived. It is like a scene and a half. But man, there's something about the food of that region, which I think obviously echoes a lot of the food that we have in Iran, that just speaks to me so much. I could not have been happier every day from breakfast till dinner. I was overjoyed eating that produce, and the preparations are simple, but obviously so soulful. And really, this chef is really focused on authenticity. So we spent some time in Bodrum, and we were on boats, and that was really just, I think that salty water does something for your soul.
Oh my gosh.
Just everything I needed. No, fortunately, no one, I did not step on a sea urchin, which is good, which is such a difficult thing for me to do. I love them so much that I'm drawn to them when I get off of a boat, and no jellyfish stings. So I feel like that was a win. And then we went to Istanbul, and I hadn't also been back there in a bunch of years since before the pandemic. And oh my God, it is so incredible to be someplace where you're just embraced by hospitality and the warmth of the people and the cacophony and the color. And so, of course, going to the spice market was my favorite thing. But then it's just so nice to be elsewhere. And I think part of what was so hard for me as somebody who always grew up traveling around the world during the pandemic and during lockdown was just being so stationary. And we've talked about this, you and I, before, Dash, like I love my neighborhood in Brooklyn. It is such a cute, sweet, lovely respite from the rest of my life in New York and elsewhere. But it's like the suburbs of New York City.
Yeah.
And so to be someplace where it was history and art and food and just people and also the waterfront, we were staying at this gorgeous new hotel, which I can't speak highly enough about, called the Peninsula Istanbul. It just opened. I know that I'm going to talk about hospitality a lot because it really matters to me. And the idea that this hotel just opened in February, and we're recording this in August. So barely open a few months, and already they were excelling in just being so natural with the way that they were engaging with you, and each person had their own way. I always think about Aman Hotels as a great intuitive hospitality hotel, but this Peninsula was truly so magical. The setting was almost surreal. It was right on the banks of the Bosphorus. 3 former shipping buildings. So there was I think it was, the main one is where people would basically like come into port and come and check into like the Ellis Island of.
Yeah.
Please don't actually fact check that. I have no idea if that's true, but something along it was like a 1920s like cruise port basically. And then 2 other equally old buildings from the 1900s, and they restored them. And now there's this whole area called Galata Port, which includes like lots of restaurants and shopping with local Turkish designers. And then this jewel in the whole thing, which is the Peninsula. The reason I'm mentioning it is because, Turkish breakfast is epic always, but then Turkish breakfast at a luxury hotel where they really take it seriously was so just dreamy. I never wanted to stop breakfast. I just wanted to sit on the waterfront, look at the seagulls, look at the boats going by. And then, they bring out, have you had Turkish breakfast before, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay, so like it's a dream, but then when you have it in Turkey, it's like, oh my God, this is my reality now. Like I live here now. And so it was, every kind of cheese and every kind of olive, and then this thing called kaymak, which is the same that we have in Iran, which is the top layer of cream, like the extra thick layer of that rises at the top of the cream, they take that and you have that on bread, on simmet bread with honey. I feel like I was the happiest person on the planet. And we've been trying. We actually went to Bay Ridge over the weekend to a Turkish market called A&D, and I bought everything. I bought all of it. I was like, I am recreating this piece for piece. I just need to, I think, start baking simmet bread myself because I don't know where to get simmet bread.
You mentioned breakfast, and I think I read somewhere that you love breakfast, as do I. But it is a little bit sad. I think in the States, we don't do breakfast nearly as well. I mean, I think you even mentioned like congee and pho and shakshuka and things.
Yes.
But one thing that I heard about that I don't know a lot about, that I dug into a little bit, that I was hoping you could actually tell me about, speaking of breakfast, is Haleem, or at least the Persian version of Haleem. What is that?
I have to first back up and say, I don't actually know where my obsession with breakfast came about, but I do think it got really solidified. First of all, Persian breakfast is delicious. And so it's very similar to Turkish breakfast, maybe a little bit less, like just, we don't do all of it. We don't do all of the sweets and all of the savory, but you have feta cheese, you have beautiful fresh baked bread that you buy at the bakery, or I now know how to make bad bread at home using pizza dough.
Nice.
And Iranians are so proud of our heritage. And I think a lot of us, cook at home. And so there's a lot of homemade jams. And so it is a little mini version, I think, of the Turkish breakfast. One of the things that you make in Iran, which is not very common, is I've actually never described Haleem. Let me see if I can do it. It's a combination of oats and chicken or turkey meat that you pound to the point where it gets to be like this sticky, velvety pudding. You add a little bit of cinnamon on top, and it is basically the hearty breakfast that you would eat in, the dead of winter when you're going to go, out for a hike in the mountains, or if you're going to, back in the day when we were in Iran, go skiing. Haleem is definitely that breakfast. I mean, the idea of adding protein to like a very carby breakfast, which is oats, is kind of, I think, genius. I've never seen it anywhere else. It is so cozy, so soporific. I think the problem with it is that you basically eat it and then you're like, now time for naps.
Yeah, concrete. Is there like Haleem shops?
I left Iran when I was 9, and then I've been back since, which I'm so grateful for. I don't know if I've been to a Haleem shop. We do have a lot of restaurants that are dedicated to different things. Obviously, there's a kebab place. You go to a place that we do love to mash some meat. It occurred to me just now. We have something called obgusht, which means water of meat. Very, very exact. So basically, it's a really, really fragrant soup that you make with lamb and a bunch of beans, including chickpeas and white beans. And then once you have the first day of abgush, which is the soup and the meat and all of their potatoes in there, accoutrements, the next day, the best thing that the kids love is making gusht kubide, which means mashed meat. And so there's every Iranian household has a meat masher, same thing you use for the Haleem, which is like a wooden mallet. And you just take turns, the entire basically family, you drain all of the liquid from the soup, and then all the meat that's left that's been slowly cooked and braised, you mash together with potatoes and the legumes.
Is it like a mortar pestle type thing?
It is, but it's huge and it's wooden.
Wow.
I'm not going to get up and go get mine, but...
Oh, you have one? What?
Yeah, of course. Everyone has one.
Of course
you do. I mean, we could get into the things that are essential for the Persian cook. But yeah, so it looks like a big mortar and pestle, but made out of wood. And then your arms get really tired. And there's no other way of doing it. Like you can't put it in the food processor. Like Iranians don't really believe in food processor anyway. But yeah, so like you just bang the shoot out of it. You see how I did that elegantly?
Nice job.
And then eventually you end up with this delicious paste of lamb and potato and beans, and that you have on top of always bread. We're always having crusty bread. And then our tangle of herbs, that is our sabzi khordan, which is our mix of herbs that we use. And then pickles. We are a big pickle culture. It's funny, I realized breakfast and pickles are my two North Poles, and I wonder if that's because of Iran. You never think about your own proclivities until you're talking to Josh.
Yeah, well, Josh or, therapist after a minute.
I'm considering this free therapy. I hope that's cool. Free food therapy.
I'll take it if I keep learning about all this cool Persian stuff.
Yeah. So wait, so the reason we're talking was Haleem. I realized that there's also, I mean, I am equal opportunity all savory breakfast. So I feel like if I can have, I'm not everyone don't turn off this podcast, but I do not enjoy sweets that much. And so for me, savory breakfast like a pho is everything. And having had it in Vietnam the way that it's meant to be had at breakfast time changes everything. Like you suddenly understand what the purpose of it is, and then you want to kind of live that life. And kanji is the same. I mean, we were lucky enough to spend a lot of time traveling to China. And my first time landing in Hong Kong and going to have kanji, I was like, oh, I now get everything. Everything makes sense now.
Yeah, I think it's really just because in the States, breakfast is synonymous with on the go. So you just,
Yeah.
anything is almost like something you have to pick up. And that's probably how the extension of eggs and bacon came, because it was just, instead of a sandwich, you have it on a plate. But
Although I do enjoy a good, like a New York style, like deli egg
yeah.
sandwich. I actually miss those. Now that I don't go into an office in Manhattan, I really do miss having one of those, a good, like perfect, one of those like on a griddle, like correctly made.
Yeah.
I love those.
Nothing
Love
like a
those.
bodega egg sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we make them here at home, just because
Please tell me
we live
more.
outside the city now.
So what's your trick?
Well, you have to have good bread. I think that's, and when I say
Ah.
good bread, you have to have the right bread. It's not actually good bread. It's just the type of roll.
Mhm.
And also, I think I learned you can't have like fluffy, I tried to make like the fluffy scrambled egg and put it
No.
on there. It's just not the same. We have a griddle. We have like a really cool, like DCS stove, and there's a griddle attached to it. And so you kind of have to griddle the egg,
You
so it
have
gets
to.
that
And
nice,
butter?
like,
Butter or no butter?
butter.
Butter is
Yeah.
better. Yeah, butter is
Yeah.
essential for eggs, especially if you're going to make kind of lacy fried eggs that are like just
Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
and crisp for that. Because you need a little texture. Have you ever been to Palace Diner in Maine, in Biddeford, Maine?
No, I have not.
They do an egg sandwich that is nothing like what we're talking about, but it is really genius. So these guys, the chefs, are fine dining chefs who basically took over a rail car in Biddeford, Maine, and they
that's
opened
cool.
a modern diner. And I've been going there for as long as they've been open. And basically, they do every version of a diner dish, but like a superlative version. So their tuna sandwich is epic. Their pancakes are stupid good. And then they do this egg sandwich, and they basically make a tray, like a sheet pan of eggs, and they cut squares out of it. And then on top, they put sliced jalapenos that are not soggy. They're very crispy. I don't know how they do it. Cheese, melted cheese. And then it's on, I can't actually remember what it's on, but it is, I mean, we have now recreated that sandwich many times at home. It's real, real good. Real, real good.
This podcast is brought to you by Mies, the culinary operating system for food professionals. As a chef and restaurant owner for the past 20 years, I was frustrated that the only technology that we had in the kitchen was financial or inventory software. Those are important, but they don't address the actual process of cooking, training, collaboration, and consistent execution. So I decided if it didn't exist, I'd do my best to get it built, so the current and next generation of culinary pros have a digital tool dedicated to their craft. If you're a chef, mixologist, operator, or generally if you manage recipes intended for professional kitchens, Mies is built just for you. Organize, share, prep, and scale your recipes like never before, and get laser-accurate food cost and nutrition analysis faster than you could imagine. Learn more at www.getmies.com. Many years ago, I owned this restaurant in Park Slope called Bark, and we had a couple of them. And we had breakfast. So it was like hot dogs at, in the lunch and dinner, but we had breakfast on the weekends. And we would make this egg sandwich. And because we wanted to do it at scale, we basically just took silicone molds and made a custard. Like
so
just
smart.
Eggs and heavy cream and salt. That was it.
Pop them out.
Yeah. And you just literally can pop them out, put them right on an English muffin. Which, by the way, English muffins with a lot of butter are also really good.
Underrated. I agree. But it has to be a good English muffin. I agree. But like it is with a lot of butter and toasted correctly, it is kind of a genius move.
Bays are really good. Bays English muffins are really good.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that tip. Please, let's just share all of the specific intel. Do you have a favorite pickled jalapeno brand? Because it's an issue for me. I get them from a place called Trappy's in Louisiana. because
Yeah.
they're the only ones that are like crunchy enough for me. I like them really like just like crisp.
We grow all our own hot peppers. So every year I grow a lot of
Okay.
jalapenos, and I just literally the most basic. It's a 3-2-1 pickle. Sometimes there's a place called Japanese Pantry
Uh-huh.
in San Francisco. They have the most incredible like soy sauces and katsubushi, and they were actually on the podcast a while back. But they make this pickle liquid that is, if you're in a pinch, is awesome. It's just rice vinegar, sugar, I think a little dashi. I'll just literally pour that over the jalapenos. But
I have no shame, Joshua. I'm just going to say right now, it is now, jalapeno season. So I would like for a jar
oh yeah,
for my use for this fall and winter. 1, 2 jars, whatever you got.
I
Since
write
you're
that down.
pickling up there in magical Westchester County, are you writing it down? All right. It's only been 10 minutes and I'm already asking for things.
Hey, well, that one's an easy one. So I'm going to ask you something, actually.
Okay.
I actually do want to talk more about travel. And obviously, we will get into your incredible past, which is a big part of what I was excited about. It's just, obviously, you grew up in Tehran during the Revolution in 79, came to Paris, and then eventually came to the States, I think around 13, and illustrious career from there.
It's actually 40 years this month, Josh. Crazily.
Wow.
Crazily.
Wow, that's insane.
Crazily.
Wow. There's a lot I want to, I just selfishly want to ask about there. But selfishly, also, what I want to ask about is you speak 4 languages, and I think your mom speaks 6.
She is a really very cunning linguist, as they say.
How do you learn 4 languages? Are there like tricks after a while, after the 3rd language? You're like, okay, now I can just start adding more on.
Okay, it's really funny that you say that because I am on a mission to learn Italian. If anyone who's hearing this is tutoring in Italian on the side, I would love to talk to you because I think the way that you learn languages is by learning them young. I think that's the key. If you learn young, your brain is just really malleable and ready to just absorb. Also, necessity. So it makes it sound much more glamorous that I speak all these languages. But the reality is the reason I speak them is because I had to, kind of go to school in different countries.
Yeah.
And so I basically had to, or I wasn't going to be able to communicate.
I know you took Berlitz when you went to France, but didn't you learn a lot of French from a Vietnamese woman?
Yes. Oh my God. You've done your research. When my family left Iran in 1979, we moved to Paris. Those of us who didn't speak French, which was everybody, went together to Berlitz before school started. And I ended up going to a bilingual school, but the other language was English. So, which is another language that I didn't really speak.
I forgot you didn't know that.
So there was a lot of catch up, but again, the best way to do it is by being immersed. And so I was. And then when we started school, I went to the school called École Active Bilingue, which was in the 15th, very close to our apartment. There was a wonderful teacher's aide named Anne, and she was her family was Vietnamese emigres. And she was a teacher's aide in my class. And so I have no idea how it happened, but she ended up coming to our house to teach my mom and me more French, just to help in tutoring. And the way that we would do it is by making Vietnamese food. She would come to our apartment and after school, and we would make pho and we'd make some rolls. And it was also teaching us about Vietnam, where I hadn't even thought about Vietnam at this point as a 9-year-old, and began my love of Vietnamese food. And her kindness, I still think of to this day. She really was just so patient and so wonderful, and made me love pho, made my mom and me more proficient in French. I remember, it's funny, I was looking, everything was a blur back then. It was a lot of displacement, a lot of difficult times. But I remember, kind of don't want to admit this because after that was a very good student, but I looked at my report cards from that time at that school, and man, I was not getting good grades in French or in English.
Why? Why do you think that was? Obviously you learned it.
I think it's because I didn't know. I didn't know the languages. And so I was just going. I mean, they say fake it till you make it. I think that really applies to moving to another country with no language and having to assimilate. It was interesting only because people were so welcoming, and that school was actually such a lovely place for me to land in the midst of so much turmoil. I was in a class with kids who were also from other places. So there were a couple of other Iranian students. There were American students who were studying, whose families were in Paris for whatever reason. I wasn't the only foreign one. I think I just had been through maybe like a big bit of turmoil at a young age.
Yeah, well, I mean, leaving a country in revolution at age 9 is not, it's not easy.
Not easy. I think that's why we all need to really be so empathetic to the many, many people from multiple countries these days between Syria and Afghanistan. And there's just so many places where people are being displaced. And if you meet somebody who has emigrated to this country, whether they wanted to or didn't, just be really kind, just be really patient. They're going through a lot.
The transition, has to be incredibly tough. But by the way, this is how our country was founded. So
yes, it's true.
Was people
it's true.
fleeing
It's
to come
true.
here
There's tons and tons of great stories about immigrant resilience. And I think actually one of the things that I love about food, our food world and our restaurant world right now, is how much our stories are being told. I was just texting with the amazing Nasim Ali Khani from Sofrid this morning. And, the idea of somebody who is from my country, who's been through what I've been through, who at 59 opened her first restaurant and now in only a few years has cooked at the Met Ball, cooked at the White House, been nominated for a James Beard Award. Restaurant is packed every single day. She is, one of those people who I look at and I'm just in awe. And there's so many of those stories, which I'm very proud to be in this industry at this moment. We certainly have a lot left to do to make it more equitable, to make it more fair, to make it more supportive. But I do think we're in a really exciting phase for what we do, what we're passionate about.
I'm excited to chat with you about that because I wanted to get your thoughts on underrepresented people and cuisines. Before we get off of this,
oh my God, there's so much. There's so much. Josh, should we make this like a 5-part?
I know. There's too much to go through. But I have so many, selfishly, just a lot of questions about Persian cuisine. And
sure.
And generally speaking, obviously, you get calloused when you're forced to sort of emigrate somewhere, forced to move somewhere, which I think is part of what people, like you and Asim, it changes you. And there are a lot of things that are incredibly challenging. And then there's also things that callous you that make you just so much stronger as well. But I don't know a lot about Persian cuisine. I think probably a lot of people don't know a lot. After you and I spoke, I started digging into it a little bit more. When I was in Park Slope, my barber was Persian. And he would tell me all the time how he would go to this place and I forget where, and that's where they would eat.
Now I want to know where, because there isn't that much, there has not traditionally been that much great Persian food in New York. We have really good Persian food in people's homes. I think the Iranian diaspora in Los Angeles has done sort of a better job of representing Persian food in restaurants, and also I think in DC as well.
Oh yeah. One thing that I think is sort of kind of bubbling up for me as I learn more about it, I'll preface this by, there's a lot of chefs that listen to this podcast, obviously.
Hey, chefs.
I'm really, what seems to come through is that it's very ingredient driven, actually. The actual ingredient that you're using, whether it's the type of mulberry or the herb that you're using, the specific, varietal of that herb, and the techniques, it's like ingredient driven and technique driven. So I guess a question for you, and this is kind of broad speaking, but what do you think chefs should know about Persian cuisine that we might not know?
Oh my gosh. I feel like, where do we start? Okay. So Persian cuisine. When I first moved to the States in 1983, it's interesting because oh my gosh, I'm going to break a lot of people are going to get mad, but I thought American food was not very, okay, let me back up. Let me just try to figure out how to say this without making everyone mad. So when I moved to New York in 1983 from Paris, and before that from Iran, I was surprised, and my family and I were surprised by how little access there was to incredible primary ingredients. So at least for the consumer, I actually don't know what it was like for chefs. Though it's funny, I was just talking to Eric Repair, and he was talking about the early days of when Gilbert came to New York, which was around that time, and how he would go to the market, the fish market, and there just wasn't the fish that he was accustomed to getting in France. not because it wasn't being imported from France, but because Americans didn't have a taste for seafood, certainly not for meat cuit, so half-cooked fish. And so there was a lot of development in terms of palate and focus on freshness and focus on ingredients that I think I had become accustomed to as a kid in Iran and certainly in Paris. So I'm not name dropping. It just happened that I also was talking to Eli Zabar, and I was saying his shop Eat, EAT, was around the corner from the first place that we lived in New York. And I remember going in there and being like, oh gosh, there's some good bread here. There, we can find cheese that isn't wrapped in plastic wrap, like, and in the refrigerator, which you would have never seen, in Paris, but was very much the norm here. If I was going to compare Persian food to any other cuisine in light of what I was just talking about, I would say if you've been to France and you've looked at the way that people go to the market there and people have a place where they go for their affinage for their cheese, and they have the butcher that they go to for their meat, and they have a different one they go to for their chicken. You shop on the day and everything is fresh and seasonal. That is very much the sort of foundation of what Persian cuisine is as well. Then you layer in our spice palette, which is turmeric and then saffron, fenugreek. We have both dried and fresh herbs that we use. My mom to this day feels that American dill isn't fragrant enough, so she brings dried dill from Iran when she goes, which I think is legal. And if it's not, please don't tell the government, because I really like her fava bean rice.
It's fine.
Dried dill is not okay. I think it's okay.
I think dry. Yeah, I think
dry is okay. Fresh is not okay. I think she's a very solid citizen, responsible human. And also, again, there's a dill rice with saffron and fava beans that is just beyond, and you can't make it without the dried and the fresh. And so in terms of that focus on primary ingredients, very, very much about the best of the best. So if you're going to be using walnuts, they have to be fresh. Again, my mom is my true north when it comes to Persian food. I think she's she is an incredible cook. She actually, crazily, even though she's not a chef, cooked at the James Beard house for the entire house on her own.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, in the 80s. She is the OG. I think she is the OG in New York of incredible Persian food. And I don't think she's really ever, she did it, she was as a hobby. It wasn't like she was a cook in any way or a chef. That's not true. I shouldn't say that. My mom's an amazing cook. She's never done it professionally, and she deserves all the recognition. And the fact that she cooked at the Beard House, and at the time I was a cranky teenager and refused to help her. It's still a sore spot for her, I'm sure, and
That's
for me, because I'm embarrassed that I couldn't get it together to go and be supportive of my mom.
That's just what we do as kids.
I know, but this is now continuing our theme of therapy through food. In terms of what you eat, we have the foundation of everything is the rice. And so I know tahdig and the crunchy rice is having a moment in social media these days. Rice is every meal except for breakfast. That's bread. And you are judged, quote unquote, as a chef. If you are going to be, any of the chefs listening are going to be trying to make Persian rice, it really is about the length of the rice and the way the rice grows and the way the rice is separate when it is served. And so each grain of rice is celebrated, and it isn't a mush. It's not a peel off. It's really actually not a terribly difficult technique. I've done it before for social media. It's just that you need the right tools, like with everything, right? Tom Colicchio, I'm not calling him out, but I'm kind of calling him out. He was adamant for an event that we did for Top Chef that he wanted to cook Persian rice, which I was so happy for, but he wanted to cook it in cast iron. And I was like, Tom, you can't cook it in cast iron. You need to cook it in nonstick. And he was like, well, the grandmothers back in the day, they didn't have nonstick. And I was like, yeah, and their rice didn't come out. And their tahdig they would like scrape it out of the bottom of the pan. Or you need to use a gallon of oil. Nonstick gets a really bad rap. I've found this brand called Scan Pan. This is not a plug. They do a really nice job, I think, with keeping the chemicals from leaching into your food. And so I feel like I'm grateful for that, because I can't live without a nonstick pot to cook my rice in. So that's the rice. And then we have a lot of what people call stews, but I would kind of call a braise more. There's a lot of meats that are cooked in different sauces, very slow cooked. I use a pressure cooker because I never have enough time. I actually love a pressure cooker. I don't know why people don't use pressure cookers more often. And so we have veal and lamb and chicken. quail sometimes. Obviously, we have a lot of fish too in the north. Also, it's important to know, oh my God, I'm like, how am I going to describe Iranian food? It's important to know that topography and geography of Iran is pretty varied. And so the north of Iran, the Caspian, I would describe a little bit like Maine, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
it's very fish focused. And so the north, and that's where rice is also grown. And so you get a much more garlic forward, much more herb forward, much more fish forward cuisine. And as you progress down the country, there's moments of desert, there's mountains, there's at the bottom, we end up with basically the equivalent of the Caribbean. So there's just very varied food. But I think if you think of it in terms of similar to what you might get in Turkey, similar to what you might get in India, but no spice. There's no heat in the food. It's actually heavily spiced, but not
spicy.
Not
heat,
spicy, exactly. And then obviously we have what we're known for, in restaurants is kebabs, and we really do a great job with kebabs. We do it on the mangal, which is the open fire cooking on wood.
Like a grill?
On a grill, yes, but not a regular grill, like one of those ones that's open and there's coals underneath that are from wood to coal. And then the super flat long metal skewers that you basically, whether you're making ground meat, kubide kebab, you shape it on that metal skewer. And if you are going to be making chicken or beef kebab, you slide it onto the skewer and then it cooks over these beautiful coals. I mean, it's redolent with the smell of all of the amazing woods that you use. And and that's it in a nutshell. That's not at all. That's not even the tip. I mean, I feel like the fact that in my basement, in our apartment, in the basement of our house, there were jars and jars, basically amphora of pickles. There's medicinal herbs. I mean, it is
Are they fermented pickles or?
Fermented pickles, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have, we are known for our garlic pickle that stays for years and years and years. And so like you bring out like a clove of garlic that's been pickling for like 5 years, 10 years.
Wow.
And they're black and gnarly and delicious and sweet. Yeah. Families keep their own vinegar, make their own vinegar. It's really, yogurt. We make our own yogurt. It's basic. Obviously, who's going to buy yogurt? You make your own. And so that's what I actually love about, if you are curious chefs out there and humans out there about trying Persian food, I would recommend going to Sofre in New York. If you're in New York, it is really, really a special place. Najmieh Batmanglij, who is kind of the Alice Waters, I would say, of Persian food, has just opened a restaurant outside of DC in McLean called June, which means your heart, and it also means dear. It's a term of affection. If I was going to be really affectionate to you by the end of this podcast, Josh, I would call you Josh June, which would mean we really like each other. My mom calls my husband's name is Peter John. She calls him Peter John John. John and June are the same, but different levels of colloquialism. So extra.
Wow.
Iranians are extra. I think maybe I'm just a basic Iranian. I'm just extra in that way. Everything is just like 1+1.
Well, it definitely shows in the food. Most chefs probably know this, but some of the best caviar in the world comes from Iran. Some of the best saffron. I mean, rest in peace, Baruch from Saffron King. If anybody had, that's how I first learned about a lot of these ingredients back in the day. But yeah, I mean, some of the best products in the world come from there.
So let me start with caviar. So caviar is something that I grew up with. It's something that Iranians, if you're lucky enough, grow up with. God, now I know it's going to sound bad. We had it for breakfast. That's what the traditional way that my family had caviar was, not in a fancy way. It was actually in a very like product driven way. And so it was hot Persian tea, which is pretty tannic, and you often eat with a sugar cube that you put into your mouth and then drink the tea through. That's the classic way of doing it. And you drink it out of a glass. So you drink it out of like a very delicate, almost like fluted glass. And you have this very hot tea that you drink it classically. Like if you were going to have feta cheese and some berberi bread or some sangak bread in the morning, that's how you would drink your tea if you were in a tea house or if you were at my house. And then with caviar, you would just take some butter and spread it, just some fresh, beautiful butter, and spread it on the bread and just put a dollop of caviar on there and have it with your tea. No champagne, no caviar bumps. This was like a really beautiful, earthy breakfast, the way I think Scandinavians have herring, or the Italians have anchovies. Not about the ta-da as much as about really celebrating the flavor.
Yeah.
Wait, before I go on about caviar, I will say, so, it's illegal to get caviar from Iran anymore. And so to export it. And so I found these wonderful Iranian guys actually who are based in Los Angeles. And if anyone who's listening is looking for a caviar source where they're doing a really as close a job as you can to actual Persian caviar, my mother approved, which is a big deal because she's like, don't bother with bad caviar, which I agree with. They're called Dorasti, and
How do you
they
spell that?
are Dorasti, Dorasti. Yeah. They're two young Iranian guys whose dad actually was in the caviar trade in Iran. And they are doing the closest thing. Again, I'm such a snob with caviar. But for my birthday, that's where I get my caviar, is at Dorasti, and it never disappoints. Like Ludo Lefebvre works with them. Maylin loves their caviar. So I think that I know they're legit. I've tried it all. I've done every caviar taste test. I'm happy to say that Dorasti is phenomenal. So
I can't wait to try it.
I still only get my saffron from Iran. I'm spoiled in that my mom goes back. And so I get one little palette of saffron. Josh, there might be one in your future if we can trade for jalapenos.
Oh, I don't think that's a fair trade, but
I
I'm
think
okay
it's
with
fair.
that.
I think it's fair. I think it's fair. You have to listen to me talking for an hour. I feel
No,
like
are
it's
you
fair.
kidding? This is awesome. I love hearing about this. I feel bad because I'm bogarting all this conversation with Persian cuisine, and I want to hear about all this other stuff you have going on.
Listen, there was a time where all I wanted to do was assimilate. All I wanted to do was fit in here. When I say here, I mean in the US, in my business as an editor. I was a magazine editor, and I honestly didn't think it was my role to talk about Iran. I thought my role was to celebrate France and Spain and Italy and Vietnam, because it felt too self-referential to talk about Iran. And it also felt maybe like nobody cared, which is, I know it sounds crazy, but that's how I felt. And to allow myself permission to celebrate Iran, this is all I want. I don't care about talking about myself. Who cares about me? Yes, I've had a great career in food and in media and in travel. And I'm very, very lucky that I have gotten to pivot in a bunch of different ways that are really interesting for me, maybe not for anyone else. But the idea that I have a platform now where I can celebrate being Iranian is honestly my biggest joy. My gratitude is boundless. And for the people who come out in social media and ask me about Iran, whether they're Iranian or not, and then the Iranians who I've gotten to engage with because of the fact that we're all so connected now about our shared passion for things like yogurt and chips. Like we literally, Iranian kids love to snack on yogurt and chips. This is something no one would have talked about. Chips,
yogurt, and chips together?
Potato chips. You put yogurt and then you take salted potato chips and you dump them in there.
That kind of makes sense, like sour cream.
Yeah, but like we eat like with a spoon. And I honestly think I've talked about this before, maybe not enough. It was really hard moving here and being so different. And you have to put it in the context. There was no internet, so I didn't have access to all the other people who were having the same emotional strife in all the different. I know I was not unique, but I was unique in that there was no one else around me when I moved to Westchester, to a town that was very homogeneous in a lot of ways. I didn't have access to diversity, and so I sought it out with the kids who were other. So there were some Japanese kids, and that's who I became friendly with. But being made fun of in a lunchroom for what you bring to eat is really scarring. And so I think that I've never really thought about this, but all I want is for kids who feel left out to feel like that they're part of something bigger. And so I don't have kids, and I know that this is a chef's podcast. This is not this is not my opportunity to reach out to children. But I will say it's really important for us to celebrate each other's differences more than our sameness. And what I've realized as somebody who's had to assimilate over and over again is it's so tempting to step away from who you are to fit into what you think you need to do in order to belong somewhere. And then it's a big step to say, no, I'm actually completely different than you, to the point where I think I'm actually quite annoying. I can't stop talking about Iran. I can't stop talking about our food and our foodways and who I started out being before I got kind of veered into a lot of different paths. Maybe it's annoying to people, but I think it's my duty. It's my responsibility, because there's a lot of people in Iran who don't have a voice and who don't have an opportunity to celebrate what's special about our culture.
Yeah.
That was a really long...
No, it's amazing. And I think you've sort of transitioned now, away from editor-in-chief to lots of other things. But it reminds me of when folks ask me like, hey, should I start this business? And I would tell everybody, like, never start a business unless you can't not. Not that you're starting a business, but you can't not talk about Persian cuisine now. And I think it's such a part of you that it emanates from you. Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.